Hi, and welcome to Everything with Emily, where we talk about everything with me, Emily. Today, Blue is joining us to dive deeper into topics of drug addiction, loss, and ultimately recovery. Hi, Blue. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How
Thank
are
you for
you?
joining us.
Thank you.
To start us off, I'm just going to kind of ask, where did your story begin?
My story begins as a 4-month-old when I was kidnapped by my biological father, and he had broke my left leg. And then after that, at 3 years old, I met my stepfather, and I've had a pretty much rough life from the beginning. We moved to Florida from Arizona, and around 7 years old is when I started getting sexually abused by my stepfather.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
So yeah, it's kind of where it starts.
In your early life, can you kind of go into some of the different traumas or experiences that kind of led you to ultimately get into drug addiction?
What led me really was the sexual abuse, and then also knowing that my biological father was not a good person. The sexual abuse started around 7 years old and ended around 13. It was constant. I was in softball. Me and him were traveling every weekend. We were going to softball tournaments, so it was just me and him in
Away.
hotels.
Yeah, out of state or out of the
Right.
city.
Without mom and sister and brother. So there was a lot of alone time and there was a lot of conditioning. I had no idea it was wrong. I had no idea that my sexual abuse was even abuse. It was something that was normal every day.
What kind of made you realize, like, hey, wait, this is not normal? A father figure should not be doing this to someone.
So I met this girl. Her name was Jasmine. She was somebody that I had a crush on in 6th grade, and we used to skip class together. She told me about her sexual abuse, and that's whenever I found out that it wasn't normal. It's whenever I found out that I also wasn't the only one.
How do you think finding out that it wasn't normal, like, what did you do with that information?
With that information, I started to, honestly, it was more self-harm. It was more against myself.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to ruin the family
Mm-hmm.
and tell the secret, but I did plan on telling the family either that or I'd also tried to commit suicide at 12 years old. And that's what started a mental hospital stay for the first time. And even then, I didn't tell.
Did your mom have any suspicion of the abuse, do you think?
Looking back at it now, she and I have had talks well enough to think that she had that suspicion, but she pushed it aside because she didn't want
She
it to be
ignored
that.
it.
Right. She didn't want it to be something that was reality for her.
Yeah. She didn't want to accept it.
Right, right.
So how did she eventually find out that you were being abused by him?
6 days after my 13th birthday, I was in a mental hospital, and this was also right after he had left, and it was the last time I saw him. It was New Year's when he left. I told my mom over phone on a therapy session, and I just remember telling her that I was sorry and I was crying, and she automatically was like, no, we're going to fix this. You're never going to see him again.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 days later, he killed himself.
Did he ever admit what
did.
he was doing to you?
Yes, he did. He sent messages to my mom. He drove from Maryland all the way to Oklahoma, where they were living. I was in Texas in the mental hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And he admitted it within those 3 days and said sorry. And then that's why he committed suicide.
Do you think, looking back, being in the hospital helped you to, tell your mom and open up, or?
Yes, so that was actually a part of my plan. So I had gone into the mental hospital at 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had a month break, and that's whenever I had seen him around December. It was January after New Year's when he left.
Yeah.
And within that month, I ended up back into a mental hospital, and it wasn't because I wanted to kill myself. It was because I wanted it to stop.
Yeah.
I saw him conditioning my little brother, and that's what scared me because I didn't want it to happen to him.
Was he also abusing your siblings at this point?
From what I knew at the time, no. He did also abuse my sister, yes. Yeah. She's very quiet about it, though.
Yeah, more reserved about it.
Yes, 100%.
You said you were in the hospital. What mental illnesses or diagnoses did you get when you first entered the hospital?
I was diagnosed with bipolar, PTSD, ADHD, and they tried to add a lot more diagnoses, but those were debunked by the time that I was 15.
How many times do you think over your teenage years you were admitted to the hospitals?
From 12 years old to about 16 years old, I'd have to say in all 3 years altogether, I was in around maybe 15 facilities. I was transferred to Missouri, Texas, and then all around Oklahoma.
Do you think your time in those hospitals ultimately helped you or hurt you?
Hurt me.
Hurt you?
Yes.
Why do you
And
think so?
I was heavily abused in those mental hospitals as well. Having reactions or emotions you were not allowed to have, or you were held down on concrete. And I had 6 men at one point with their knees all over my body, my neck, my head. I was 13 years old, and
Wow.
I couldn't get up.
Wow.
And they would shoot me with this medication that is known as ketamine. It's a tranquilizer to get you to calm down. It got to the point where that tranquilizer, no matter how many times they used it on me within a day, it wouldn't work.
Wow, because your body was just so used to it?
Yes,
Because they were doing it to you that much?
that much. It was very common for them to just use that as a way instead of de-escalating in a kind of way.
Healthy manner.
Right.
While you were in these various hospitals, did you also view that abuse that you were enduring as normal? Or did you think, oh, maybe these professionals that are supposed to be helping me shouldn't be holding me down and shooting me with ketamine?
I knew that it wasn't normal. I was being gaslit, and they were lying to my mom. So anytime I would reach out for help or say, hey, this is what's happening,
Yeah.
they were told, well, they had told my mother that it was a lie, that I was crazy. They would call me schizo. They would call me all these different types of names to break me down to the point where I just shut up. I stopped talking about it because I
Yeah.
knew there was no hope.
And when was the last time you were in the mental hospital?
The last time was due to an overdose when I was 17 years old. I was there for a week, and it was about 3 weeks before my 18th birthday.
Wow. How do you think your upbringing, your stays in the hospitals ultimately contributed to your drug use?
So in the hospitals, I was surrounded by a lot of drug addicts and a lot of people that would come in and out of juvie group homes, and they taught me how to cheek my medications, which means that there's a pocket in the back of your throat, and you would hold on to those medications, and that's where I started to mix medications. And it was the euphoria of not feeling anything, not seeing anything around me, and that's what I wanted. And then after the mental hospitals, it was homelessness that really, like, when I was kicked out at 16, that's when it really kicked up.
So when you were 16, were you living in Arizona?
I was living in Oklahoma.
And you got kicked out?
Yes.
And how do you think being kicked out and being on the streets so young changed your perspective, if it did at all, on like what you were doing, the drugs, anything like that?
So being on the streets, I was afraid. My perspective was, okay, now I have to survive and now I have to stay up.
Yeah.
And actually caused me to go to methamphetamines to stay up. I was grabbed by many men on the streets because I was a pretty young woman.
Yeah.
And I was working at Taco Bell trying to sleep at my work. So yeah, I mean, I was doing everything I could to just survive at that point. But it was an addiction.
Yeah. And at that point, what drugs had you been using or messing with?
A little bit of everything. I was messing with meth mostly at that time. Xanax, there was Molly, and I had messed with heroin around that time as well. It was a mixture of just anything I could get, anything that would get me high.
How old were you when you first started to self-medicate? Was it 12, like you said?
Yes.
What did you start with? Because obviously you don't just go straight to meth.
So I actually, I would find anything and everything at 12. I was not only, whenever I was out of the hospitals, I was using Benadryl.
Yeah.
I found out that in the 1800s, nutmeg was a way to get high, so I would use that. I was looking it up constantly, just trying to find mixtures of medications and whatever was household. It was mainly Benadryl, weed. It was just a mixture of just whatever I could find.
So then when did you start leaning towards more like fentanyl, heroin, meth? When did that kind of change?
That changed whenever I got old enough to be around the right people for that. I was maybe around 15 whenever I started getting Percocets. My friend, her dad had cancer and she had access to that medication. So I was able to get medical Percocets. I was able to get any drug I asked for. The group of friends that I was with, I could get. And I did not start fentanyl until later because fentanyl was not a known thing.
Yeah.
But meth was huge around our group. I've tried crack a few times. We would put cocaine in our blunts, which wasn't very smart, but smoking cocaine is crack.
Yeah.
So we were just kind of running around being heathens.
Can you share some of the things you witnessed while being surrounded by other addicts, or maybe some of the things you personally have done?
Yeah, so there's actually a specific time when I was, this is perfect example, okay? So me and my friend, old best friend, we were doing coke and it was mixed with meth. We knew it.
And still did it.
Right. And we were drinking all at the same time. And in that same night, we ended up getting into a fight. It lasted maybe 6 hours. I was hit by a bench, a 2x4. I was jumped by 3 other guys. I had guns surrounded by me. And we had, I was threatened by a gun. But because I was on drugs, I looked at them and I was just laughing. The whole time.
You didn't realize you were in any danger?
I had no feelings towards it. I was okay with that outcome at the same time because we were all fucked up. So we were just doing certain things to each other that just wasn't okay. And it was all over a girl.
Wow.
So, yeah.
With that, how do you think you were able to overcome that and ultimately survive the streets?
Surviving, honestly, drugs is what helped me survive. And it taught me a lot of strength and unfortunately fighting and learning how to fight.
Yeah.
I think it kept me up enough to keep going, if that makes sense.
And at this point when you were on the streets, did you have a job?
I did. I worked at Taco Bell.
Oh, okay.
And I ended up working at Walmart for a little bit around that time as well. And I did go back to my mom's house for a bit. And then I moved out here to Arizona.
And was all that money kind of coming in, just going straight towards drugs?
Drugs or, materials at the same time. And I was actually selling drugs. So I was buying drugs with the money that I was making
Mhm.
from work, and there was no profit in it because I
Yeah.
was a drug addict myself. So I was selling to whoever needed it, but that was so that I can get more for myself as well.
Yeah. At your lowest point, how much, like, what were you mixing and how much were you doing a day, would you say?
My lowest point was whenever I was on fentanyl, and I had a few friends pass away. It was I was probably smoking about 2 to 3 pills a day, and one hit can kill
Yeah.
you. So it was a lot, and yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah. What was the moment you kind of realized that this was in fact a problem?
I realized when I started throwing my own self-beliefs out the window, when other people were passing away, and when I had no feelings towards it anymore because it became normal. I had to realize.
Watching your friends die became the normal, so you almost became immune to it.
Yeah, yes,
Were there any times that you also came close to death?
many times. I've overdosed, I don't even know how many times, but I remember this one specific. I was laying next to my friend, and we were
Mhm.
watching TV, and I had blacked out, and I could tell that my body was no longer functioning. I couldn't open my eyes. I was trying to open my eyes, and the next thing you know, I woke up, and my friend said, "You were out for 4 hours."
4 hours?
I had no idea.
Wow.
When I woke up, I just kind of like got up, and I was like, "What happened?" And she's like, "We've been trying to wake you up this whole time." And that's when it really, really scared me.
Yeah.
But I went back to smoking it right after I got up.
So what was your kind of last wake-up call, in a sense, that made you really want to go sober and stop doing these or the drugs?
It was actually my last relapse that really stopped me
Mhm.
because I was going to go back to it. It was about a year and a half ago
Mhm.
in December. I had relapsed for about a week, and then I realized that if I were to do all of that, my dreams would not become a reality. I've always wanted to help other people. I've always
Mhm.
been a kind, loving person, and I was losing that part of myself.
Yeah.
And that's what really made me get up.
How long have you been sober for then? Since December or last December? Was that your last?
Yes, yes. I did have a one moment about 4 months after that where I took one hit off of a meth pipe. And it was I don't call that a relapse because it was one hit and an automatic scared me.
Yeah.
This feeling in my gut just dropped. So I'd have to say that I've been sober since last December.
And what would you say has pushed you to stay sober? Because obviously there's many different outlets and ways that you could just fall right back in if you wanted to.
It's the idea of proving everybody wrong. It's the idea of proving myself right
Mm-hmm.
and listening to everything that I've been told that I would never accomplish, and now I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then, so where are you living and working now?
So I do live in my truck,
Mm-hmm.
and I work at MCC at a VA office. So, I'm still kind of making it.
Yeah, and you're in school, right?
Yes, I am.
What are you studying?
Psychology.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
What do you kind of want to do with psychology or helping others in general?
I'm working to become a motivational speaker.
That's awesome.
Yes, I want to not only do motivational speaking, but I also want to build a brand around my name to be able to help homeless people and etc.
That's really cool. So what are some of your future goals? I know becoming a motivational speaker and helping others.
My main one is having my own family
Mhm.
and being able to help other children, especially adolescents in mental hospitals,
Yeah.
get out of a specific type of abuse. I want to change the entire industry.
Are you still close with your family, or have you kind of drifted apart since your upbringing?
So recently, we have actually started to get close again.
That's great.
But there is a distance between all of us.
Yeah.
And I would love to see that become collapsed.
Yeah. My last question is, what advice would you give to young addicts or people on the streets, just anyone who can relate to any part of your story?
The best advice is to find your motivation. Find what you're passionate about and to never allow anybody to tell you what you're able and not able to do.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on, Blue. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, thank you.